So welcome to today's booktube video, which is a discussion video, and it picks up something I mentioned in my no disclaimers tag video, where I made the bold statement that I will not go and see films that are adaptations of literary novels. And I thought I'd better expand on that, really, because it's probably quite an unusual point of view. I know lots of book lovers who love going to see film versions of books that they really like, but I'm completely against that. For me, people can do what they want, obviously. So the first reason for that is books are books and films are films. At least I think that's how they should be. But of course, virtually every novel that is produced today, before it's even published, has signed away its film option rights. And a lot of them never get made into films, so all that's meant is it's a nice extra earner for the author, which I'm all in favour of, obviously. But it's just it seems to represent to me sort of Hollywood's complete lack of originality, that it needs source material all the time. It can't come up with its own ideas. Films that start with a blank piece of paper and a script writer who writes with no outside influence. It's purely devoted to the medium of film. There are some films like that. Lars von Trier seems to do that, although interestingly he's drawing a lot of techniques from theatre. But anyway, so there's this sort of ravenous hoovering up of all sort of fiction, in case out of that is a pearl of an idea that film can make lots of money off the back of. So it seems to be a completely indiscriminate mechanism. Someone will go into a meeting with the producer and pitch 10 ideas based on 10 novels, and if they're lucky, one of them will strike a chord. This doesn't seem to be a very good way of doing art to me. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when you read a book, it's just you and the author's words, and all the work that the author has put into the book. Then you take on all the work of your imagination in responding to it. The pictures in your mind based on the words, and there's no one way of interpreting it. It's your personal reaction, and someone else reading the same book might have a different take on this. And this is the essence of reading. It's an imaginative. It's not by the numbers. It's not done for you. The author offers you this, but it's not set in stone. And the role of the imagination for the reader is a great part of the pleasure of reading. It makes us an active participant in the book. We're forging out of what the author the fire has provided for us. But with film, you lose that, because it's become a ménage à trois. It's you, the author's original book, and now we've got a script writer and maybe a director. Really, is the key creative influence. That the script writer is just a functionary. That's why you have so many different script writers, get booted out and someone else is brought in on films, which happens very commonly. So it's no longer my imagination sort of stamped on the novel. It's the film director's. And a lot of what I might have thought of a book, she has closed off those options by giving us her definitive interpretation of it. And to me, that devalues what a book is for me. I don't own it anymore. The director does, and I just think it leaves you with potentially a completely different interpretation. Now, there's nothing wrong. I could discuss with other readers, and between us we can get a lot out of that. But a film that's up there, 30 foot high, however long a movie screen is, it's definitive. Take it or leave it. And I find this doesn't serve books well. If you think about it, two recent films, or relatively recent films, one was Life of Pi and one was Cloud Atlas, which I've read the books. Love Life of Pi, liked Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas is 6 different stories, 6 different genres, 6 different times. How are you supposed to make a movie out of that without taking a firm line of how you transition from one to the other, which are decisions I made as a reader, but mine were much more fluid, whereas this is going to be up on the screen. In order for them to be able to deal with the material, they're going to have to put a very definitive stamp on it. And Life of Pi is sort of similar, that there's sort of 3 different tones in that novel. It starts off with this sort of idyllic childhood in in Pondicherry in Italy, in India, then moves into this sort of dark sort of, boy and a tiger on a raft, and the tiger wants to eat the boy. And then the third one is towards the end, when he sort of flips the reality that we've been assuming of the boy and the tiger on a raft. Again, a film is just going to make more concrete decisions on this than a reader necessarily would. So that's the first reason why I won't go and see films of literary novels. Just to point out that if a book is just basically an action or a thriller, but it's not really that sort of about the interiority of the characters, and I'll come on to interiority. I'm perfectly happy to go and see those. So Dennis Lehane's Mystic River, which I read years before it got turned into a film. I can't stand Cormac McCarthy's books, but I'm sort of relatively happy to watch them as movies, because to me they're just action thrillers. So I don't have a problem with that. I'm really talking about literary books, and the reason this comes to the second reason why I don't think literary books should be turned into films, and that is because literary books are about interiority. They're about the inside of a character's mind. Film can't do that very well. Film can suggest at it. It can use images and mise-en-scene and a few sort of techniques, but it cannot compete. Film does a lot of things much better than novels, particularly visual representations of reality or scenery and all of this. But it cannot do interiority, and an absolute arch example of this is one of my all-time favourite books called The Damned United, which is a book about a football or soccer, if you're American, manager, real-life manager, who happened to be the manager of the team I follow. But that's you don't need to know anything about football to enjoy this book. Basically, he lost his job at my club because he took on the owners asking for more money, and he lost. Basically, he backed himself because he just won the championship, the title, and he thought he was untouchable, and he wasn't. So he has to go off and sort of start to rebuild his career at this sort of low-level team. His great rival, when he won the championship against the odds, he gets headhunted by the England national football team. So there's a vacancy at this team, and this football manager gets that job. And in real life and in the book, he only lasts 44 days in the job, because basically he goes to war with the players. And he goes to war with the players because when he was at the other team, he basically tore them down in the eyes of his own team to sort of build them up. They're cheats. They do everything, a bit like the Patriots, basically, in American football. And when he goes into the dressing room of this team, he said all these terrible things about them, and he has to stand by them. So he tries to use it as a mechanism to basically get their respect by basically showing that he's boss, he's top dog. And these grizzled veterans aren't having it, and they stick together, and they go to war back against him, and eventually they win. He only lasts in the job 44 days. But that's the sort of background of the book. What the book is the interior of this guy's mind, where he's obsessive, he's paranoid, they're all plotting against me, what can I do to stymie them? And he so hated the former manager, the former coach of this team, that the first thing he does when he gets to his office is he chops up the other guy's desk. He doesn't want any trace of him at all. And that's the level of sort of paranoia and intensity. And the way the book's written is he's playing all these thoughts over and over and over and over again. It's just, it's not a book with forward movement. It's a book about our obsessions and how we play stuff over repeatedly, trying to work them out. And it's brilliant. But the entire book is about inside his head. It's a monologue or a stream of consciousness to some extent. And they did a film about it. And the film couldn't get any of that. Even with a decent actor like Michael Sheen, it was not about that. The film turned out to be a linear treatment of his career. So with this, having just left the team that he won the championship with, he's at the lower leg team, he gets the call, goes in, and he goes to war with these players. But it's, it's like a history. Whereas the novel is a fantastic psychological, treatment. And the film can't bring us that. No matter how good the actor is. Because unless the actor is basically narrating every single word of the novel to show this sort of repetitive, obsessive psyche, you're not going to get it. So, films cannot do interiority, so why take on novels of interiority? It makes no sense to me. So, there, one thing that undermines my argument is it's quite hard to distinguish between a film that's made entirely based on a book and does a very faithful recreation of it, which again, I cannot see any point of faithfully recreating a book. What are you adding to it? What are you bringing to the book if all you're doing is reproducing it in a visual sense? But the other side of that line is where it's only sort of mildly based on the book. So if you take a movie like Apocalypse Now, which is in my all-time top 5 movies, you can't say it's based on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, but it certainly refers to it. And it moves Conrad's set in the in sort of heart of Africa. It moves it to the Mekong River in Indochina and is about the Vietnam War. And it's a completely new, different work of art, genuinely different from Conrad's book. Conrad's book is its source material, but it's that's as far as it is. Scriptwriters wrote a script that had nothing to, most of the incidents in the film, do with helicopters and R&R and sort of, trying to take Vietnamese held bridges, all this sort of, mind-bending stuff in the movie, which is sort of implied that it's done under the influence of drugs. None of that's in Conrad. And it is a genuinely new piece of work, and it's a very literary film because there's lots of references to T.S. Eliot. What's that? I'm trying to think of the name of the poem where he quotes the Hollow Men. These are the Hollow Men. 4 quartets. That's the poem. So there, it works, but I think it's significantly different from the original novel. That it's not, it's not an adaptation of Conrad's novel at all. It's not the same thing, but you may feel that undermines my argument. But to further that, there are some books which are regarded as unfilmable, and yet the sort of arrogance of filmmakers is no, we'll take on the challenge and we'll beat the challenge. So 2 examples of this are William Burroughs' The Naked Lunch and Tristram Shandy. And both have had relatively recent filmic treatments, which are disasters. So Naked Lunch, interesting, both films have a framing device as the way into the film because you can't just do it as a sort of face value treatment. So The Naked Lunch uses the framing device of inserting William Burroughs, the author, into the film and all of his sort of reprobate activities of drug taking and shooting his wife and things like that. But the problem with that is it takes you out of the story of the novel of Naked Lunch. Naked Lunch is a notoriously fragmented, which is why it was said to be impossible to film. It's notoriously fragmented, and all this framing device is fragmented even further because you're in the novel narrative for a bit and then you're dragged out into some event from Burroughs' life. So it's a total failure. There's 1 or 2 really nice images in it, such as the typewriter that's under the influence of drugs sort of turns into a sort of bug, but as a whole it's a flop. And Tristram Shandy, the framing device in that is 2 actors are wanting to stage Tristram Shandy, so it's really about the 2 actors trying to get the dramatic version of it, which I think is used as a sort of layering device because Tristram Shandy itself is so opaque and layered because of its narrative style. In a way, it's an anti-novel, although such a thing is an anachronism because, of course, when it was written, it was not considered an anti-novel, which is very much a sort of 20th century concept. But, Tristram Shandy is such an unreliable narrator who doesn't even appear in the first 7 parts of the book or whatever. And the actor's device, it can't begin to get to grips with the genius that is the novel Tristram Shandy. So if a book is described as unfilmable, hint to auteurs, it's unfilmable. Don't even go there. Okay, there's another class of movies that I do sort of understand why they take literature for their source material, and that's sort of costume drama movies where they're based on works of Jane Austen or Thomas Hardy or whatever. I'm not really against these because, in a way, I see them as a way of introducing new readers to these classics. I myself am not interested in watching the films. A lot of them are on TV. The BBC do a lot of them. But I'm perfectly happy for them to exist. As I say, because I think they serve a useful function. The downside of that, though, is when this is sort of theatre stage more than film, but it happens in film as well. When you take Shakespeare, how can we have a new take on a Shakespeare play? I know Macbeth is about power struggles. Why don't we cite it in the Politburo, the death of Stalin, and the power struggles for that? That makes no sense to me because where does all the witchcraft stuff, which suffuses Macbeth and is vital to it, how does that fit with a Politburo struggle in the 1950s? So I'm against that sort of reinterpretation. So basically it's a faithful visual version of it in the sense of the dialogue is pretty much left unchanged. But the visual framing and the context that it's put in, that's the artistic flourish. And more often than not, that doesn't work. So all those reasons are why I'm heavily against film adaptations of serious literature. Excuse me. Please feel free to disagree in the comments. I know I'm out on a real extreme limb on this one. It's probably a pretty unpopular view, but it's something I've always felt and I hold very firm. I have seen Naked Lunch. And bitterly regret doing it. I should have stuck to my guns. And I saw Cock and Bull simply because it was on TV. I didn't actually make an effort to go and see it. Not that that's an excuse, you may feel I'm being hypocritical here. But generally, for example, Life of Pi and Atonement, that's another one, and Cloud Atlas. I've never seen the movies, and I don't anticipate ever seeing them because those books have a special place in my psyche, and I don't want them sullied, which is what I would regard a film treatment. I find it very hard to believe that any film can improve a novel that was written as a novel, not with a visual sense in mind. And again, I'm fully aware that a lot of you might feel no, a film has added to the original novel. It's something that wasn't maybe clear in your mind from the novel was beautifully rendered and made clear by the director. And I accept that can happen, but it is a purely subjective thing, and I have my vision and my version of the novel in my head, and I really don't want that. If I really enjoyed the novel, I don't want that shifting. You may think that's tiny-minded of me, but I'll just have to accept that. So that's my elaboration on why I won't go to the movies to see adaptations of literary novels. And please feel free to weigh into the debate. Thanks very much.